Socrates never wrote a word, and yet his questions orbit our minds like a stubborn comet, pulling us towards sharper thinking. In the dialogue pages Plato left behind, a living, stubborn curiosity persists, asking not what is true, but how we might know it. This video untangles that stubborn thread through the lenses of two modern interpreters, Myles, Burnyeat and Bryan Magee, and asks how their tips reshape our own thinking about Socrates and Plato today. Truth, in this sense, is never a possession. It is a practice, a way of asking the right questions at the right moment. Burnyeat's reading invites us to see Socrates as a midwife of ideas, not a preacher of fixed answers. He suggests the power of a question lies in forcing another to articulate what they truly believe, to expose the gap between what one professes and what one actually thinks. Magee, on the other hand, reframes the scene for a broader audience, philosophy as a lively, human conversation that uses narrative, irony, and diagnostic humor to illuminate perennial problems. Put together, their tips remind us that philosophy isn't a road to certainty, but a staircase toward closer scrutiny. Plato's dialogues are not dry arguments, but living stages where a patient deduction wrestles with stubborn shadows. When Socrates asks, why must virtue be chosen over wealth or power? The aim isn't to win a point, but to win clarity. Burnyeat emphasizes that Socrates often refuses a neat conclusion, insisting that the right question sometimes outlives the answer. That stance can feel nearly revolutionary in a world hungry for definitive resolutions. Magee, meanwhile, shows how the same scenes translate across centuries. The essence of philosophical drama is not the triumphal shout, skeptical pause that follows a suggestion. To understand Burnyeat's tip, imagine a courtroom where every witness is your own belief. Socrates doesn't stand there to condemn. He stands there to reveal how your ideas hold themselves up or collapse under pressure. The Olympus, the method of cross-examination, becomes a tool of liberation when you realize your own thinking is the terrain you must survey, not a fortress you defend. Burnyeat's insight reframes Socrates as a craftsman of discipline. He doesn't supply answers so much as reveal the weakness of confident certainty. This is the secret power of the dialectic, not a victory over others, but a clearer victory over error within. Magee's contribution widens the lens. He guides us to see the dialogue as a theatrical instrument, where characters argue not to persuade, but to illuminate the texture of the issue. Plato's form of argument is often subtle, weaving ethical intuitions with logical probes, balancing the warmth of human concern with the cold rigor of reasoning. Magee helps a modern listener listen for texture, the cadence of a Socratic remark, the irony that softens a stubborn claim, the leap from a concrete example to a universal question. In his hands, the ancient text becomes a map for how to think, not a museum piece to admire. Yet the twist emerges when you compare their methods. Burnyeat asks us to respect the fragility of our own convictions. Magee asks us to see philosophy as a conversation that travels through culture, time, and fear as much as through logic. The paradox is that the strongest method is often the most humble. To admit that a question may outgrow any single answer, and to discover that the purpose of philosophy is not certainty, but wiser questions. This is where the ultimate Socrates feels like a mirror, what we demand of others. We must be willing to demand of ourselves. In that mirror, Plato's authorial voice becomes a secondary instrument. Socrates remains the central figure, yet his fame rests on the questions he provokes rather than the conclusions he asserts. The dialogue form itself becomes a tactic, a way to invite disagreement that clarifies rather than concedes. Burnyeat's emphasis on the living birth of ideas through dialogue suggests a model for intellectual humility. Let the question evolve inside you until a more precise trouble emerges. Magee's accessible style then invites you to carry that trouble into everyday life, to hold open a space for doubt when certainty promises a shortcut. So what is the turning point for a modern listener? The shift comes when you realize that the value of Socratic inquiry lies not in the final verdict, but in the autonomy it gives your own thinking. The true gift of Burnyeat's midwife analogy is that you learn to recognize birth to a belief that can stand on its own, and the moment you're merely nursing a fade of certainty. Magee's contribution is the invitation to perform philosophy as a living practice, not a dusty archive. When you combine them, you don't get a single, neat system. You get a more honest relationship with your own mind, a readiness to revise, to wonder, to stay unsettled. The final insight is stark and personal. Socrates, Plato, Burnyeat, and Magee are not asking you to choose sides in an ancient tug-of-war. They're offering a toolkit, questions that never close, lines of inquiry that keep moving, and a sense that thinking is an adventure you undertake rather than a product you purchase. The ultimate philosophy, if there is such a thing, is a posture, the willingness to stand in uncertainty and still act with integrity. It is the quiet courage to say, I do not know, and that is exactly where I will begin. As you step away from the screen, carry this. Your mind is a workshop, not a courtroom. The questions you return to tomorrow might not give you the final answer, but they will give you back your own power to think clearly against the noise, with a gaze that remains open yet precise. The legacy of Socrates and Plato is not a creed to recite, but a method to live by, and to own the responsibility of your own reasoning. What question will you carry forward into your next conversation, your next decision, your next quiet moment of doubt? The invitation remains the same. Start with a question you cannot dodge, and let Burnyeat's humility and Magee's clarity guide you toward a more thoughtful life. OUTRO philosophy begins when a question disrupts your certainty and ends when you apprentice yourself to a better question. If this fusion of Burnyeat and Magee helps you hear that, you've already taken the first step. Now, what will you question next? As you step away, the living dialogue becomes your own lab. Burnyeat's midwife and Magee's storyteller aren't distant tutors anymore. They become mirrors you can hold up to your daily choices. The questions you carry into meetings, into a quarrel, into a moment of temptation, are not about defeating others, but about trimming away the extras that dull your aim. What would it mean to treat each belief as a hypothesis you test, not a badge you wear? Imagine testing a conviction the way a scientist tests a theory. Seek an outcome that would falsify you. If your stand survives that pressure, it earns a stubborn, dignified authority. If not, you revise. Burnyeat's method trains you to tolerate revision as a sign of growth, not failure. Magee would add, cultivate the narrative around your ideas so they can travel beyond the echo chamber. Explain them as if your listener might actually change their mind. The value is not to win the room, but to widen the room for truth. This is where ethics enters the picture. Socratic questioning isn't a weapon. It's a discipline that keeps your impulses honest. The social world loves slogans, certainty dressed up. The Burnyeat-Magee fusion resists that rhythm by slowing it down, by reminding you that a good question can taste like risk, feel like a dare, and promise a clearer map through confusion. When you translate it into action, you don't become a cynic of certainty. You become a careful architect of belief, always ready to adjust the blueprint. Let me offer a practical two-step routine. Step 1. In the morning, name one belief you're confident about and ask, what would it take to overturn this? Write down one potential counterexample, one plausible critique, one opposite experience. Step 2. In the evening, reread that note and mark where your confidence held or cracked. If you can repeat this with a calm, almost scientific patience, you're living the Elenchus as a daily ritual, not a memory from a lecture hall. And because Magee loved accessibility, apply philosophy to conversation itself. When someone presents a strong position, Mirror their logic back to them in your own words. Then probe with a gentle follow-up. What assumption is that based on? Or what would you concede if you were truly listening? The goal isn't to win a debate. It's to illuminate the terrain where disagreement hides. The more you practice this, the more your own voice gains clarity, and the more your heart stays open to revision. The twist, again, is not that certainty is bad, but that certainty without reflection becomes brittle. Burnyeat shows us the fragility. Magee shows us the courage to share that fragility without apology. Together, they craft a philosophy that fits modern life. A stubborn humility that keeps moving, a narrative craft that keeps others in the conversation, and a method that makes thinking feel like an act of care rather than a battlefield. As you let this sink in, consider a final image. A staircase carved into living rock, each step a question, each landing a new clarity. The climb isn't about reaching the top first. It's about becoming someone who can climb with integrity, who leaves room for others to climb too. The ultimate Socrates we glimpse here isn't a clever trickster, but a steady companion, someone who asks you to arrive at better questions, not to pretend the answers are already in place. So the practice continues, in small moments and quiet rooms, with the patient, exact work of thinking. Burnyeat's discipline, Magee's warmth. In your own willingness to stay unsettled form a kind of philosophy you can live by, not a theory you recite. We don't chase certainty. We chase the clarity that honesty affords. And in that chase, we discover that philosophy is, at its core, a generous act, inviting truth to be bigger than any one mind, and inviting us to become more capable listeners to the world's questions. What question will you choose to test tomorrow, knowing that the test